Our speaker is one of our own. Charles Mitchell has been a very solid member of our CHIP Clublet, and he is currently the leader of our CHIP Clublet. And he came up with an unusual topic that's called How Not to Go Psycho over Psychometric Pre-Employment Testing. And it's something that we've never had a presentation on before that I can recall, and he's going to tell us how to navigate that. He is a long-term semiconductor industry professional with many years at AMD, where his last job there was a client strategy manager. Before that, he was a marketing manager, senior marketing manager, and before that, he was a vice president of strategic planning and system marketing, so he knows a lot about seeing into the future. So with no more delay, Charles Mitchell.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about a topic that's unfortunately kind of dear to my heart. Because it is born out of something that actually happened to me, and I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen again, and I hope my hard lesson might be to your benefit. I'm also someone who likes to have fun, so I'm going to offer an incentive. I have up here some tickets to MedFest. This is the Greek festival that's going on right now. We're going to have a few opportunities here for you to participate. Here's the tickets. And so we will get started with this. And you may wonder, the strange name tag is because this is going to be a little bit game showish in style. Hopefully the fun will help you to remember some of these things. So I brought up the cautionary tale a moment ago. The last time I took, or the prior time that I had taken a pre-employment psychometric test was all the way back in 1982. That's a long time ago. It's called the Wonderlic test. Some of you may have taken it in the past. It was on paper. That's how long ago this was. And I scored in the mid-90s. I think I recall it was a 95, and I felt very proud of that, maybe a little bit too proud of that. Yes? We're going to go through that in just a second, but good question. And by the way, I have no problem with being interrupted with a question if you'll just simply raise your hand. This year, I took a psychometric pre-employment test in a case where someone walked up to me and said, I may have a job for you. I scored in the mid-60s. Ouch. And the reason I scored so low is I wasn't prepared for the changes that had taken place in the way the tests were done. And so I'm going to talk to you about how you can do well on these things. And you ask, what is a psychometric test? There's really two types that are commonly used in pre-employment. There's the personality test. Now, you're all probably familiar with things like the Myers-Briggs and those funny little things that are buried in your Facebook page all the time that says, you know, you're most like this tree or that flower. But this is different than those kinds of things. This isn't whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. This is more about job skills and how you would perform in unique job situations. The other part is the skills test. These look more like the questions that you had back in high school on the PSAT and the SAT test. And indeed, our kids today take lots of tests, and the tax test being the one that's probably the most controversial. But the tax test and the SAT test are actually influencing how the pre-employment psychometric test for skills are being done. So it's important that you know about those tests and how they're influencing the test that you may have to take to get a new job. In addition to that, there are job-specific tests. And some of the job-specific tests are things like, well, if you're going to get hired as a Java programmer, you probably can expect to have someone ask you some questions about how would you do this. Maybe you'll be asked to stand up at the whiteboard and write a few lines of code or on a piece of paper so that they understand that you know what you're talking about. In other cases, you may be asked to submit a portfolio. If you're someone who is a photographer or some form of technical writer, you would be asked to submit some past work so they can judge it. That's a little bit different test from what we're talking about. Now, some of the popular personality tests are the dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. This is a 4-quadrant behavior. You can see the little diagram up there, test that's commonly used. There's also a more complete 16 personality factors test that has more dominant and sort of subordinate characteristics to it. Caliper profile and the California psychological inventory, which more than a couple of times I've been asked to take by employers. So these are common tests, and it really is something that you can look up online. Some of these companies, if you just simply Google them, actually have information about the test that's important to you. And we're going to talk about some of the things that you might find there, or if it's a different test, questions you're going to want to ask the potential employer about the test before you take it. The skills test is usually a separate test from the personality test. They're usually timed. You may be asked to answer 50 questions in 12 or 15 minutes. That means you've got about 15 seconds for each one of the questions. That's important. The questions will be a lot like those SAT questions that you saw back in high school or the tax test. And like the tax test, what's the big controversy about the tax test now? Is that we train our kids to take tests and not teach them the curriculum. Unfortunately, we don't need to go there, but unfortunately this has a side effect, in that our kids know strategies for taking tests, and these same strategies are now actually in these pre-employment tests. And so it's good that you know about them. And you can approach the test in the same way that your kids would approach the tax test. So if you're going to be taking this kind of test, be sure you ask, if you have an opportunity in advance, which test am I taking? That lets you, if you have, say, the test the next day, or if you're asked to take it online and turn it in within the next 48 hours, that was something that I was asked, it gives you time to Google that test. You'll often find that the test company has examples online and will show you more about it. But some of the key things you're going to want to know is, how is it administered? Is it available on paper? That may be particularly important for someone with a physical disability. Are you allowed to use a calculator? I always think calculator built into the software of the PC. Can you use pencil and paper? And those kinds of things may seem odd to you, but often it's okay, because they're more interested in your reasoning abilities than whether or not you can multiply 2 times 4. So you want to know those things in advance. So they're going to impact how you're going to be able to take the test. Now, we're going to have a little fun. We're all familiar with that sound, I think. Unfortunately, if you're unemployed, you're familiar with this sound. Too much daytime TV. All right, I asked someone to give me a list of names, and it's right here. That's very good. Okay, I'm going to ask 3 people to come up. Hopefully you're all here. Pardon any bad pronunciations here. George Minka, Becky Sofcott, and Stuart Moser. Stuart? Well, that's all right. Come on. 3 of you, line on up. Brave souls that you are. Now, to help you out, we're actually going to be a little kind here, and I'm going to give you pencil and a note card. Because what's going to happen in just a second is I want you to stand over here, because you're going to need to see the screen. So here's your card. Take a pencil in case you need to scribble anything. You're going to have about 30 seconds. And here you go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 questions up on the screen, very much like what you would see on a psychometric test. These are all number pattern tests. So what I want you to do is, on the card, is to read each one of the questions and then just write down in sequence which letter you think of the 4 choices you've got is the correct answer. And you're going to have 30 seconds to do 3 questions. You've got on average 10 seconds per question. If you get to the end guess if you haven't been able to come up with an answer. All right? Are you ready?
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
All right. Who's ready? Ready? Okay. Becky, I'm holding the answers here. You have no idea? Okay. All right. We may get down to, if you get them all, who gets 2 or who gets 1. George, are you going to try, Becky?
Yeah.
All right. Come on. Guess. Or tell me what your answers are.
All right. The first one is D is David. The second one is D is Tragic. And what's your Charles?
So she said D, C, and
B is in boy.
wow. Okay. George? There's, and don't know on the next one. Okay.
D, D, and D.
Oh, that's the guess. D, D, D. Okay. Well, Becky, you got them all 3 right. Wow. All right. Just so you know, in the first case, each one of the numbers is 3 1/4 less than the previous number. Simple math. Often in the number sequence test, what you find is each number is a addition or a subtraction of a fixed amount. That's one style. Now, this is important that you practice on some of these tests online, or are going to talk about even on your phone, so that you get used to some of the different kinds of sequences that you may see, because some of these wouldn't necessarily occur to you unless you've seen prior examples. The next one. What's the difference here? Well, all those numbers are evenly divisible by 5 except for C. 54 isn't divisible directly by 5. It has a remainder if you do. And then the next one I think is the killer one. You ready? Okay. I don't know why we're getting the music again, but don't worry about it. What's happening here is their ratios. 1 divided by 1 is 1. 3 divided by 1 is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 105 divided by 15 is 7. Start to see the sequence. 1, 3, 5, 7. They're odd numbers. So what's the next ratio? The next odd number, 9. So 9 times 105 is 945. So just having that example, yeah, I hear a few, but once you've seen these, this is why it's important to take some practice tests. Because you'll see another one like this, and the tip-off is when you see a sudden explosion in the size of the numbers to the right-hand side, where you got small differences and then boom, they start getting really big. It's a geometric progression. And so this is an important concept to grasp because you will see this kind of question. All right, contestants, thank you very much. And let me give Becky, there are 2 tickets for the Mediterranean Festival.
Thank you, sir.
There you go. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. But on a practice test I took, I saw sequences like this 3 or 4 times. Was there another question in the back? Can I make it larger? If I bump your toes here, will it be okay? Well, I'm going to lose part of the graphic, but I think that may be okay, because the graphic on the side doesn't matter so much. All right. I hope that helped. Feel free to stand up and come down the side if you need to.
So, what is this supposed to prove? I mean,
Oh, okay. What is the point? I'm sorry. Maybe the point didn't get caught. The point is...
what I'm wondering is, if an employer gives me this test, I'm like, yeah, I had algebra many years ago.
Uh-huh.
Why are you asking me this now?
They're assessing your skills that they believe will apply to the job. Now, to some degree, this is not just skills, but it's also a reasoning test, as much as it is a mathematical test. And we're going to see some that are even more so in just a second. It's a problem-solving capability that they're looking for. And we're going to talk on this tip slide. Let me do the tips, and then I'll expand off of this tip a little bit as to how it's more relevant. Okay. Practice can be really helpful. Remember I said most of these tests are usually about 50 questions, and you have to answer them in 12 to 15 minutes. One test, the test I took, I think it was 12 minutes. And the computer just basically went blip when the time was up, and you didn't get to go any further. It's better to skip to the next question than dwell on a question. This is what really happened to me. The very first one that came up, you're going to see one in a couple of more slides in, very similar to the first question that came up. And this was the absolute worst question that could come up for me because it was math and spatial relationships. And I really think I'm good at spatial relationships, so I was be damned if I was going to go on until I solved that sucker. And so I sat there for 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, trying to solve that one question when I could have answered 5, 6, 7 more questions if I had just let go of that and gone on. Remember, 50 questions, 2 points apiece. What if I'd gotten another 6 or 7 questions answered? My score would have gone up 12, 14 points, wouldn't it? That's significant and could easily be taking you over the threshold from whether or not you're rejected or accepted. So it's important to know when to move on. And so taking tests that are practice tests are important to you because they teach you a rhythm. You can actually find online little timer things that will tick for you at a certain rate that are mostly for musicians, but you can slow the rhythm way down. And it's important because you need to get inherently how long 15 seconds is. If you have to, while you're doing this, try and kind of in the background of your head, hum that first chorus of the Jeopardy theme, because that is 15 seconds. They play it twice on the show to give the 30 seconds they give the contestant. But if that helps you initially to just get a concept of how long 15 seconds is, because if you get to 15 seconds and you don't know the answer, you need to move on, because you're hurting yourself from taking away the potential to answer other questions that you might well be able to answer.
Hey, Charles?
Yes, ma'am.
And most of these tests, are you able to go back?
Well, that's one of the questions you should ask, because some of the tests, when they were given on paper, of course, you could go right down the thing, flip, and then go back into all the ones you left blank. Some of the online tests allow you to come back around. If you get to the end and you haven't answered several questions, it just starts you back up at the top again, and you can roll through. And I've got a tip coming up in just a minute about this, but I'll prefetch it. One of the things there is if you do know in advance and ask, will you be allowed to go back? Often, while your mind is still working in the background, while you're solving other things, you'll realize what the answer was, and you'll be able to come back around. The other thing is frequently, in the panic to get to the end, you rush and you don't read the question correctly. You may find the second time through, oh, I misunderstood the question entirely. I now know the answer. Does that get it for you? There's another question back here. Stand up, if you will, and try and project as best you can.
You need to repeat your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a bit of clarification. I've taken a lot of psychometric testing, especially as I've been putting in a lot of applications. Out of the 3 jobs I've had total in my life, 2 of them actually did psychometric testing very, very.
Of the 3 jobs she took in her life, 2 actually did require her to take a psychometric test. I feel like, what was the group on Wall Street who amplified everything? Go ahead.
So one of the things that you're asking about is going back in the test. A lot of times with the timed ones, it will only let you go back while you're still in the time. So if you get 10 minutes to do 150 questions, if you get to the end, still in the time frame, and then you can go back. If your time's expired, you cannot go back.
Yes.
So make sure you answer things, skip them if you don't know it, and just leave it at that.
Another reason to skip is that the way the tests work, you get all the way, you have to get to the end. The tests are generally designed that 90% of people will not be able to get to the end. So the idea of coming back around isn't that really that important, because chances are you won't get back around unless you went click, click, skip, 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 and you skipped a lot of questions. You won't be able to loop back around. Yes, ma'am?
Would it be better to skip or just guess?
Well, that's another option for you. And particularly as you see that she's asking, is it better to skip or guess? If it's something that's a mind blower and I haven't a friggin' idea, guess. Because you've got if there are 4 or 5 questions up there, you've got a 25 or 20% chance of getting it right. Particularly if you find yourself, I have 50 questions, oh no, I've only gotten to number 36, guess. Because if of the remaining 14 questions, if you guess, you're probably going to get 3 or 4 of them right. And if you just look a little bit and use a little judgment, that percentage actually goes higher. So guessing is a good idea, particularly if you feel pretty much, it's not looking good here, I'm not going to get to the end. Go ahead and guess. There was a second question. Did that cover it? Yes.
What types of industries are administering these tests?
It ranges from everything from what type of industry administers these tests? A lot of them do. It can be everything from you're getting a job as a nurse to you're getting a job as a computer programmer. For me, it was in a management position it was asked, which it was unusual because I think most of the time I've taken a management position, it's been on a referral and no one ever asked me these kinds of questions. But when it was something that I applied for directly, then I was asked those questions because they didn't have any background reference information. They wanted to know more about me. I'm going to take these 2 questions and I suggest we move on. Yes, ma'am.
I'm also always been referred, but I applied to deliver pizza once and I had to take one of those tests.
She had to take it when she applied to deliver pizza. I think the personality test is one of the things that they go for in those, because one of the things that's a metric in the personality test is how trustworthy you are and what you're likely to do related to the money that you're collecting. There was another gentleman here. Yes.
Getting back to the guessing thing, there's no penalty for guessing?
Generally, on most of the on these tests, there's no penalty for guessing because you're going to run out of time. You can always ask that, and you should ask any question that comes to your mind prior to taking the test. Okay? More tips. Let's see. I think I prefetched this in our questions already. Be sure you understand the rules. If you don't know, ask. You know, and we talked about skipping questions, and that even if you guess, you've got a 20 to 25% chance of guessing right. If you use a little intuition, you can raise that somewhat. And you want to guess, particularly if it's looking like you're going to just completely run out of time with about a quarter or more of the questions unanswered. All right. 2 more tickets. All right, let's see if we can get some names here. No twice. Carmen Matthews, Donna Lita, and Kate Watson. Come on down. All right, let me catch up on my little note cards here. These are verbal skills. Can you all read the screen all right? Or is that getting a little too far to the side? Okay, good. All right, are you ready? Here we go. Write down your answers. Raise your hand when you think you've got your answers. I'll call on the first person to raise their hand first. Write down your answers. Raise your hand when you think you've got your answers. I'll call on the first person to raise their hand first. All right, well, let's find out. Are you ready? Kate, what do you think the answers are?
B.
You get to keep your pencil. I'm sorry. Next. No, stay here because we'll have a tiebreaker if we need it.
I have CBB.
You have C, B, B. Hang on to that pencil.
I have C, A, and D.
Okay, you've got 2 of the 3 right, so I think you're going to be the winner. Let's reveal the actual questions. C, college is to student as hospital is to patient. Maybe we can do this like some of the game shows. Race is to fatigue as fast is to... That's right. What is a synonym of cogency? No? Force. A cogent argument is a forceful, a strong argument. All right. So yes, it pays to guess. And here are your tickets. Thank you, ladies. What's another reason to practice tests? Anxiety. Some of us have problems with test anxiety. We get all hopped up and nervous and grouchy and everything else, and don't be around me if I got to take a big major test and I'm studying for it, because if you interrupt me, I'll probably bite your head off. Sorry about that. I love you too, still, anyway. Some of us panic, but research shows that taking online tests or practice tests help get you comfortable with the test. You know the kind of material you're going to be covering. So while nothing may solve your anxiety completely, taking tests and practicing in advance will certainly make it easier for you. And particularly, you may discover once you do start taking the test, you start to feel more comfortable as the test moves forward. Yes, ma'am. Stand, please. I'm not going to go into depth on personality. I'm sorry. We can do that another time, maybe. All righty. Okay, one of the questions that I addressed when Kathy asked me to come up front and talk a few weeks ago when I said I'd be willing to do this presentation are psychometric tests, particularly the skills test, age-biased. It's actually a yes and a no question. I actually did some research on this and came up with studies that were done about 20 years ago on similar psychometric tests, particularly on the ones that are used in college entrance exams. And what they found is across age is the performance is relatively flat from the 20s through the 60s. In other words, not so bad. There is actually a slight rise in the middle of that. But there is a notable deterioration as you start to stretch out toward the 80s. But for the most part, most of us are still in a range where our minds work just as well as any kid who just came out of high school. The other side of it is, but this is the generational thing. Our kids, particularly those who have grown up during the time that the tax tests have been so important, and our teachers teach for the test, have learned the tricks for these things. They have been rehearsed on it. And if you have a kid that goes to college, you may well have paid someone to train them to take the SAT test. They also have been trained. And it is clear that training improves the score on these kinds of tests. Just think about that one with the geometric progression, that last mathematical test we had. If you'd never seen one like that before, you're probably going to go, But if you've seen one before and you understand, hey, look, the numbers are exploding at the end, this is probably a geometric progression where things are ratios, you know what to do with it. All right, one last time. Do I have any volunteers? Come on up. I'll just take and Tim, come on up. You folks get the last shot at this. Now, this, I have to tell you, is a real brain buster. It wasn't this specific question, but it was one very much like it. I had, since it just flashed on the screen and went away, but I've recreated one very similar to the one that stalled me when I took the test a few weeks ago. So, let me give you pencil and paper. There's only one question. Now, I'm going to give till the person, I will give up to a minute on this because it's not easy. And here you go. grab a pencil, card, pencil, card. Tim, let me grab another pencil. Okay, when you think you have an answer, write it down and raise your hand. This combines both math and spatial relationships. Are you ready? This is the one that came up first and caused me to waste so much time. Here we go. What is the next cube in the sequence? What's the fifth cube? All right. What is the next cube in the sequence? What's the fifth cube? We're going to talk about what the actual solution is, and then we're also going to talk about how you might reason your way into a more justifiable guess when you have limited. What is the next cube in the sequence? What you believe is your solution? Just for now, let's let everybody have a chance, and Victoria's first. So we'll give the other guys a few more seconds. By the way, I took this to the Java programming class. What is the next cube in a sequence? What's the fifth? And no one could solve it within any kind of reasonable time, so it is a tough enough. And I just hope I can explain it reasonably well. Okay, anyone else want to venture a guess? You got your guesses written down? Okay, here we go. Victoria was first. What did you write, Victoria? I can't read it. C? No, sorry, hang on to the pencil. Nope, sorry. B? No, nobody wins. Okay, we have to have a tiebreaker. Okay, here we go, guys. See if you can do this one. This one is actually out of a comp. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm going to tell you in a minute. It's a complex answer. Don't worry. All right. Guys, what do you put into a toaster?
Bread.
He said it first. Okay. Paul said bread first. It's amazing how many people say toast. So, Paul, you win. Yay, thank you. It's like who's buried in Grant, you can keep it. Who's buried in Grant's tomb, huh? Okay, here's the answer. It is A. And what the heck is going on? Well, here, let me try and explain it. What I've done here, and I said this thing is a mind twister, is I put a little star by the corner and show you how that as you go across, and by the way, this is A on the right over here, it's rotating 45 degrees each time. That makes this extraordinarily hard to do. It helps if you take and turn all the cubes so they don't churn. Then you can count. What's happening with the red dot? It moves 2 spaces, then it moves 4 spaces, it then moves 6 spaces. What's the next number? 8. 2, 4, 6, 8. What kind of test do we hate? This. All right. The blue square, however, is just meandering along at just 1 space. It's just moving 1 space each time. But what makes this really hard is the rotation that goes on. And this is the kind of thing that they can do to you. Now, what would you do, and I'm going to ask you to just raise your hand if you think, what would you do to make a good guess?
You realize each one is turned, so right there you can eliminate the guy that didn't turn. So.
Right. Okay, that's exactly right. So let's go back to here. So one of them, yes, he says you realize that all of the turning, and so the first thing you do is A, B, C, D. D didn't turn, so you eliminate D. Okay, so now you're down to A, B, and C. What else might you rationalize to make a good guess? A and B are pretty similar. What are they trying to do there? Confuse you. So it's probably A or B. So now you're down to, I don't have time to figure it out. What do? Guess. But now you have a 50% chance of being right. Much better. Okay, let's kick on forward. Whoop, more music. Oh, I love music. All righty, now let's get back. Where can I find free practice tests? Well, the first thing you do is use your friend Google, or if you really have to, Bing. Psychometric tests, you'll quickly find out, is an industry. There are several companies who create these tests and make them available. But many of the companies who actually create them have test tips online and also have sample tests right on the very same company. So once again, it's important to ask, if you have the opportunity in advance, what test am I taking? Find that out. That's your number one help right there. What test am I going to be taking? Online, one of the best places I found was psychometricinstitute.com.au. AU is Australia. This company is one of the authors of a whole range of psychometric tests. They have test tips online, and they have sample tests online. Luminosity.com, not so much. They're a brain teaser kind of company, supposedly keep your mind active. If you want things more like Toast, they're there for free, but if you want the really good stuff, you will have to subscribe and pay. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. But there are some other good apps out there too on your phone. My favorite is actually available on your Android in the Google Play Store. So if you have an Android phone, look up IQ Test Preparation. This thing is a wealth of tips on 6 different kinds of psychometric tests. Practice, where it reveals to you immediately what the answer is when you guess one, if you can't figure it out, and it tells you how you reason it out. And then it also has actual practice tests. All of that rolled into one phone app. This is a pretty good deal because it is free. On Apple, on the iOS, in their app store, you will find Brain Killer. There's a free version and a more complex version for about $2.99. The apps on the phone are actually worthwhile, particularly the Android. Also, if you have any kind of association with one of the colleges or universities in town, take advantage of it. The career departments all have testing groups, and you may well find that they can provide you the opportunity to take practice test or even the full test in advance so that you know where you stand. One of the most comforting things you can know is, where am I going to come out on this kind of test? And so you may well be able to take these tests for free. Okay, so at this point, thank you. I'm going to post this on my website, which is charleswmitchell.com. There's a ballet dancer in New York City who's charlesmitchell.com, so I had to throw my middle initial in there. So it's charleswmitchell.com, and we'll have the whole presentation up there, and I will add some more links to other locations where you can find additional information. Are there any follow-up questions at this point? Ma'am. Stand, please. Yeah, they're fun. Sir?
Are the tests like the Myers-Briggs, is that commonly given, and is it worth taking so you can manipulate the results?
Don't try and manipulate the Myers-Briggs results. What will happen is you'll end up causing the axis not to come out strongly on anything, and it always results in a suspect result. Generally, Myers-Briggs is given after employment. It's not a very good predictor of your performance in a job, and in fact, it's become somewhat less. It's very popular. It's in pop culture, but as an actual predictor of people's ability to interact, it's being somewhat dissed as it was never really developed with a rigorous scientific method. Yes, there are some others, and I'm going to draw a blank, but I'll get it on the website as to the name of the more common ones. I'm going to go here, and then we'll call time. Sir, in the back.
I had a quick question. All these tests are all kind of job related or postings for, professional type jobs. Are there sites or testing like this that would be applicable for like high school students, just in general, out-of-state testing for the,
High school students actually get the same kind of test when they take the PSAT and SAT and TAKS test. So the high school kids will probably do pretty well, but I think maybe what you're asking about is job-specific things. There are tests where you'll see things like gear ratios. You'll see 2 gears of, one of them has 10 teeth, one of them has 20 teeth, and they'll ask you which direction is the second gear going to turn or the third gear going to turn, and how much faster or how much slower. Those kinds of things do come up. for different kinds of skills. And it depends on what they're looking for. But you will see those very job-specific kind of tests. There was one other question.
Are you familiar with caliper profile?
Caliper was one of the common ones that I listed up there. I have never taken it myself, and I don't know it in detail, but their website does have a lot of information. Even Wikipedia has a whole section on the caliper. Okay, thanks very much.